Okay, so this should be working now. Okay, so there we go. So yeah, um, welcome everyone to the next stream. Like you said, the topic, it was a bit hard to come up with one this week. I even asked a lot of the channel members, what topic should I do, and none of the suggestions really felt like, yeah, that's a go-to topic. So I just decided, okay, why don't we go through some of these articles from the likes of Screen Rant, Comic Book Resources, and we can discuss some of these topics that tend to come up a lot in this more sort of kind of hot take style article that has like huge mass appeal that we as sort of hardcore fans know there's probably not a lot to these, but more casual fans often do feel this way. Like these opinions you do actually see out there online. So that's why I want to go through these. So I have, I think, 4 articles here. We'll see how we go with it. I don't know if we'll necessarily get through all of them or not. What do I have here? I have, this is an Avatar one, and then I have a Korra one with the same sort of title, basically. Then I have a longer one, I think, for Avatar, but it includes some Korra stuff. I think it's the top 20 of just like plot holes in Avatar. And then I have another Korra one at the end. So we'll see how we go, how this works. But, things have been pretty light in terms of news the last few weeks. Desperate for new content. Hopefully, next week we get the preview pages for Suki alone. But I'm not holding out too much hope, but it should be hopefully next week. So yeah, let's jump in here with this first article, which, as you can see here, is from Screen Rant. Amazing publication, of course. But they do get news articles at times. So it is weird that like some of these websites, especially CBR, which basically does the same types of articles, have got like exclusive Korra preview pages before, have announced comics and stuff like that. It's weird that to go up with the sort of major news of new books and stuff like that, that they have these sort of other articles there just to sort of draw people in. It's kind of weird that the quality really drops when you go onto these things. But anyway, here we go. Avatar: The Last Airbender, 10 major flaws of the show that fans choose to ignore. And here are its worst flaws. So a lot of the text here isn't too much. Avatar Studios, they mentioned this. This one is only from like a week or two ago, so it's pretty recent. Despite being one of the most renowned shows of all time, deservedly so the series isn't flawless. No show ever is. That's fine. That there were more than a few moments where fans just decided to sweep their questions under the rug. And, I had a brief look through this before. A lot of these are very picky. I think this one, like the number 1, is a valid talking point, I think, and we'll get into it. I think the rest of the 9 are a little bit like, you really stretch to come up with these. So, number 10, how easily Aang entered the Avatar state. And here's their logic. This flaw didn't come up until Korra came out, and Korra struggled to enter the Avatar state until the final 2 minutes of the season 1 finale. Okay. It took time, discipline, hard work, but, it takes time to master the Avatar state. Yet, Aang managed to enter the Avatar state repeatedly when he needed it as a defense mechanism, when other avatars like Korra and Roku still couldn't until they had trained for years. Though Aang did struggle with it at points, or other times it just seemed like something that came to him too quickly. So, this is, I think, just a misunderstanding of how the Avatar state works from the perspective of the defense mechanism doesn't mean you've mastered the Avatar state. The defense mechanism activates even if you haven't started to even attempt to master the Avatar state. Unless you've directly blocked all of your chakras or something like that, where you literally can't go into the Avatar state. Kind of like what happened to Aang before the book 3 finale. Unless you've done that, you can use it as a defense mechanism. The difference is, of course, Korra wasn't really put into a situation where the defense mechanism necessarily needed to activate back in book one, but it did come into play later on. And this is just, I think, the author of this article misunderstanding on a technical level how the Avatar state actually works, because Korra goes into the defense mechanism when she's poisoned in book 3, which is like the equivalent to the times Aang goes into the Avatar state out of emotions or because his life is at risk. It's just, the case of them assuming that if you haven't learned it, that you can't do it at all, when that's not the case. It's just that we don't see Roku use the defense mechanism, and Korra's is timed afterwards, so that's not really a great point. Hawkeye never came back. Now, this is relatively valid, I think. So, obviously, in The Runaway, Toph asked Katara to send a message to her parents using Hawkeye, and we never saw the result of this. So, yeah, this is fair, I think. This is a case of... I'm assuming what happened here to coincide with the comics, because again, the Rift didn't even mention Hawkeye. So my guess is that what happened is that Poppy and Lau sort of like broke up. Lau went off to do his own thing. So my guess is that Poppy got Hawkeye, and we haven't actually addressed Toph's mother yet really in the comics. So she's improved her relationship with her father Lau, but not Poppy. So if they ever do address this, my guess is that that's how they'll explain it, is that Hawkeye went to the Beifong estate, which is where Poppy was, whereas Lau kind of moved away to start the business and so on. So this is a completely valid point in that within the body of just ATLA as a show, they don't address the Toph and her parents plot point, despite that being the main character arc point for despite that being the main character point for Toph really over the course of the entire series, because the Blind Bandit is her big episode, and the issue is her dynamic with her parents. She leaves, and eventually by the time you get to season 3, she realizes she needs to address it, and she does, but she doesn't. And they don't bring it back up. So it's a bit frustrating. Number 8, Combustion Man's powers / weaknesses. So, this one was so cool, everyone just let it slide. Every other subset of bending made sense in the Avatar universe, but Combustion Man's ability not only made 0 sense, but they were never explained in the slightest. And look, this was the... this is sort of the issue with this, in that, like, okay, you're fine with metal. Sure. Blood, sure. Lava, I guess. Flying, probably needs a little bit more explanation, but sure. Combustion still is, at its core, the result of it is a big explosion, and firebending is the bending that comes closest to fire. In that if you look at the way combustion bending actually works, it's like kind of this... You sent out this kind of contained explosion, and then it explodes when it hits something. So it makes sense to a certain degree. Bending is never within Avatar explained to any particular depth or degree. So it feels a bit weird to really highlight combustion bending. I guess it does stand out as being slightly weird compared to the other ones, but it's not enough to call it like a major flaw, basically. Barely close enough to be considered firebending. It didn't tie into the premise that the bending was a martial art and extension of people's senses. Well, it's it's him using his mind. It's senses. It's meant to be the idea that he is a special bender and he has a unique ability, highlighting that bending is more than just this set of forms. That it can be something more. And I think that's one of the cooler things about Avatar, is that they don't overly restrict the bending. They allow it to have those kind of extreme extensions, like a combustion bending or a lava. So, and again, they even say it here. All that said, not a single fan cared because it was so cool. So there you go. 7, Sozin showing up to help Roku. There are 2 primary episodes of Cosmos plot holes in the Avatar universe. This is one of them. While a backstory tying Avatar, Roku, and Firelord Sozin together was a fan favourite turn and incredibly mind-blowing, a closer look will reveal many flaws, some mentioned later. This was a huge one. Roku's home island was being destroyed by a volcano, so Sozin showed up in the middle of the night to save him, only to leave him for dead after doing so. One might argue that he showed up to ensure Roku died, but then why would he have helped him in the first place instead of just taking him out? Like, do I even need to, like, go into any sort of an explanation about, like why this isn't a major flaw, and that this is literally just the writer not being able to understand the character arc that they're going for with Sozin in the episode, which is basically just that they're friends, and even though at this point it seems like they're not friends anymore, they haven't fully, I suppose, completely extinguished all care for each other. And so he sees his best friend's island going up in probably the eruption of the century. He shows some level of care. And keep in mind that when he gets there, he tries, he helps. And the reason for that is because he knows he can't just sort of take Roku out. Because we saw over the course of the episode that Roku is much more powerful than Sozin. He can't handle him one-on-one. And so he helps him right up until the point at which the volcano does his work for him. And then he's like, oh, this has just fallen into my lap. Without you, all my plans become possible. And he lets it happen. So, sure, it seems like, on a very simplistic view, that it's this kind of contradictory thing of, like, he goes to help him but then immediately betrays him. But no, that's the nuance of this situation, that their friendship was still there to a certain degree. And again, note the fact that Sozin doesn't finish Roku off himself. He lets the volcano do it all. He doesn't help him, but he also doesn't do it himself. And I think that's sort of telling, in that it is this real tragic thing that, if not for just that kind of random eruption of the gas from the volcano, things might have gone very differently. So there's that. So that's a bit weird. 6, Jet dying. One of the saddest moments. Okay. The only problem, no one ever confirmed that Jet died. They couldn't explicitly say or show a child dying on an animated series, so it was left incredibly ambiguous as to what end Jet met. In fact, it was so bad it was even addressed in the Emerald Players. It was pretty obvious. Like, what's the scene? It's Jet says to Katara, "I'm going to be all right," and then as they walk off, Toph says to Katara he's lying, and Toph can sense if people are lying or not. So he knows he's not all right. I think that's enough. Like, the idea that they needed to make it really dark and just be like, yeah, Jet just died in there, or like really incredibly like describe his injuries. It was clear. We don't see Jet again. Go into the comics, Jet isn't there. The fact that Longshot stays behind to defend, knowing that Jet's not getting up, they know that their leader is done for here, and they stay with him for his last moments. So it's just like, that's a bit of a stretch. 5, imprisoning Hama. So, okay, bloodbending. Okay, that's just the explanation of what it is. So at the end of the episode, the townspeople take her away in chains for her crimes. Wouldn't she just free herself during the next full moon as she had before? How did they keep Hama imprisoned? They may have bound her hands, but other benders developed the ability to bloodbend, and Hama was certainly a strong bender. Well, it seems pretty simple in terms of, like, they capture her, they chain her up, and then they know now how her ability works. Just don't go near her. Don't send anyone in near her during a full moon. Simple. Like, there's one thing you have to follow, one rule you have to follow with her. Otherwise, you can contain her, relatively easy. So this seems like a real stretch, this one. So I'm not so sure about that one in terms of, like, look, I get the point of, like, oh, how do these random villagers contain someone so powerful? But she needs the moon to be as powerful as she is. Otherwise, you can contain a bender. People can contain a bender. So I don't really read into that one too much. So yeah, 4. Sozin slaying dragons to earn the title dragon. Okay. Yeah. Only problem, Sozin was riding a dragon in the flashback episode. Sozin declared during the episode that he spent the rest of his life preparing for the comet to arrive and then searching for the missing avatar. So at what point did he decide to kill his flying pet for sport? Yeah, look, this is a little bit of an unanswered question. Like, this whole idea of when exactly did this tradition happen, and obviously, like, because it coincides sort of with other events, big events in his life, when did it happen? Reading into it a little bit more, you can perhaps say, like, okay, Airnoma genocide, were the dragons used? And if they were, that would probably be something that would make the dragons question following their masters anymore. And maybe something like that happened. It's like his dragon wouldn't follow him anymore after performing such a vicious act as flying up to the air temples to kill everyone. Something like that. Because again, there's also just that idea of how did they get up to the temples? They hadn't invented any of the flying tech before now, so they had the only flying equipment they had, I suppose, was the dragons. It's a little bit of a, like, okay, I get this is something that's not really explored or anything like that, but that's the way I've always seen it. Is just that Sozin betrayed his best friend. Who's to say he wouldn't betray his pet or whatever? So something like that, as well as, I suppose, just the idea of he would view the idea of, like, okay, the dragons are like the original firebenders. Test your skills, become one of the master firebenders in the Fire Nation by killing a dragon, and just purely to create a title of power. Why wouldn't he do something like that? That way his people aren't killing each other, the best firebenders aren't taking each other out, instead they're hunting down dragons to prove their strength. So there's that. But yeah, it's a weird one, and that, like, sure, yeah, we don't have an answer. I'd love more detail on the dragons, but it just more highlights we need more content covering that era, the build up to the Airnoma genocide, the event itself, and the aftermath. I really, really want to see more content with that. 3, the time it took the characters to fly across the world during the finale. This is fairly valid. It's a little nitpicky, but I think it's fairly valid. The finale, a lot had to happen over the course of 4 episodes. The team finds Iroh at the walls of Ba Sing Se. Eventually, so Appa turned on his turbocharge, and Zuko and Katara managed to make it from the walls of Ba Sing Se to the Fire Nation Palace, literally across the entire world, in a matter of minutes. Appa may be an incredible sky bison, but this was pushing it. Yeah, look, there's no real, like, counterpoint to this in terms of, like, just on this map. They go from, like, here on the map all the way to over here. And that is, like, more or less all the way across the world. Like, it's a long journey. Maybe you can say that the Avatar world is not as large as the actual world, and so it's maybe not as big. But still, in a small amount of time, it's not great. And there's other moments like that as well, where they do travel, quite a distance. But, it is what it is, I suppose, is the main problem. So yeah, that's fine, again, but it's not particularly important. Time periods between the Fire Lords. Again, from the Avatar and the Fire Lords episode, when Roku died, Aang was born. Sozin himself was already pretty old. After that, he had to wait 12 more years for Sozin's comet to arrive, and that's how old Aang was, and then spent the rest of his life searching for the missing Avatar. But it was revealed in Zuko alone that Zuko's father had only been Fire Lord for roughly 8 years at the start of the series. There was only one Fire Lord in between Sozin and Ozai. That was a Zulon, meaning a Zulon would have had to have been Fire Lord for 75 years, which seems unlikely. Yeah, look, this again is pretty fair. One thing in ATLA is that they don't work well with numbers. A lot of the numbers, when they got into it, created problems for them. There's a reason Kyoshi's 230 years old, and it's because they made a mistake in terms of saying what era Kyoshi is from. There's a reason stuff like this feels weird, that like what is it, like, yeah, Azulon would have had to have had like Sozin would have had to have had an Azulon at like an insane age, and the same thing applies to, say, like Ursa's family, in that there's a missing generation if you want to make it sort of accurate, in that like her parents would have had to have been like super old or something like that. Again, you know, these things happen. It was, you know, they had more of the details in line at this point, but they'd already kind of committed to it, because again, they'd kind of put some details in place back in like 208 and stuff like that. It did take them roughly to about the halfway point of the series to, I think, really clarify a lot of their details that they were going to commit to going forward. But you know, is it that major of a problem that we have like one or two extreme examples of characters in royal families who have had kids really old, or like lived a really long time? I don't really think so, when we have very old characters all around the place. That Boomy living to 112, Patik living to 150, and it's not necessarily confirmed that they use the aging technique and stuff like that. So there's that. Yeah, there's that. And then number one, the lion turtle gave Aang energy bending. So a giant talking lion turtle gave the Avatar energy bending seems like a very convenient turn of events. The largest critique of the entire series is that Aang was spontaneously given the power to take away other people's bending. While the ability itself is not the biggest critique, it does make sense. It was the means by which he obtained the power. Aang decided he couldn't kill the Fire Lord, so in his darkest hour he was approached by an island-sized lion turtle who gave him the ability to energy bend so that he wouldn't have to take a life. Again, it was a great ending, it just really wasn't explained very well, and the fans just had to accept it. Look, this comes up a lot. I suppose there's a reason it's here at number one, is that people do talk about this. It is probably the main critique that you see when people finish Avatar, is was this a Deus Ex Machina? And I've always defended it in the idea that, like, I don't think it's a Deus Ex Machina, because one, you do see imagery of the lion turtles throughout the show. Two, it isn't just this inherently random power that comes out of nowhere right at the end, because there is a fundamental, like, basis in the lore behind what happens here. And it gets into this issue of, well, anything new that happens in the finale, some people will consider a Deus Ex Machina, meaning that, like, you can introduce completely new things at any point in the series, but if you do it at the end, it by default is a Deus Ex Machina. That's sort of the problem that I have with this as the sort of blanket criticism, the trope criticism of the ending of Avatar, is just that, you know, things can be introduced, new things can be introduced at the end and not be Deus Ex Machinas, because you're allowed to introduce new things in a series. And especially this one, where it has the explanation of, you know, in the era before the Avatar, we bent not the elements but the energy within, highlighting that this is a technique that predates bending. We don't know too much about the history of bending, especially in Avatar. All we've been told is some vague thing about, you know, humans like learned from watching animals and stuff like that, the moon, but no real sense for, like, wait, how does that work? Because, like, Appa doesn't show any sense that he could just grant someone the ability of airbending. So how does that work? How does a human go from being a non-bender to suddenly having this power? And here, through energy bending, it opens the door to explain how people go from having no power to actually having a power, because there's an ability that predates it and sort of allows those other ones to actually happen. Now, the way it's explained in the line of dialogue, you know, it's one of those things, but I don't really have that much of a problem with it, because again, it's just, you know, a super notable being in the world of Avatar that has been alluded to before. Most notably, in the library, Aang looks at a picture of a lion turtle and comments on it, and you see that the lion turtle is talking to a human, implying like interaction between an avatar and a previous avatar, I guess. Lion turtle and the previous avatar. So this gets into the idea of like people seem to have a problem anytime a character is just sort of given an ability and not that they have to learn it or go on a journey or a whole arc about it. In this case, you know, the technique is energy and just, you know, crashing your energy against another's and being sort of unbendable. So, you know, it would have been weird to try and explain how training for that ability works. So there's that. And then, yeah, the obvious point is that it doesn't win him the fight. He still has to fight Ozai. He still has to defeat Ozai because it's a technique yet you can only perform on a defeated opponent, basically, or a restrained opponent. It's exactly like, you know, spirit bending or something like that. They're finisher moves, and this is another finisher move. It's just a different way to finish it. So there's that. It's I don't get why it's like such a major criticism for people. And because it's so sort of, I think, overused as a criticism, I think that that's why it becomes sort of like not something I read too much into. It's just because, like, I've heard this like a million times. I've heard this, you know, addressed a million times. I don't buy into it myself. Like, fine. So it is what it is. But we'll move on to the next one. So, like I said, the same topic, but for Avatar. So let's get into it here. So let's just jump in. 10. Katara saying most of her friends had passed on. The series itself was never renewed for more than one season into the future, so this one isn't really fair, but Katara mentioned in the first episode that Aang and most of her friends had passed on, entrusting the world to the new Team Avatar. However, as the series went on, audiences were rewarded by getting to see several fan-favorite characters from the series, including Zuko and Toph, both of whom were still alive. It really seemed like the only people who had died were Aang and Sokka. The writers couldn't have known they were going to do this during the very first episode, therefore it's a flaw fans have no problem overlooking. I'm not really sure what point they're necessarily trying to make here, in the sense that, like, yeah, because they never really get to the core of the criticism. Like, they just say, like, this is what happens, then we actually got the thing that we didn't get because of this line, and I don't know. Like, I get it. It's mainly the idea that we didn't get to see, like, all the other characters. Like, we didn't really get to see Aang in the present day, Sokka in the present day, and the supporting cast of, like, Sokka, Ty Lee, Mei, those type of Suki, Ty Lee, Mei, and all those sort of characters. But yeah, it's a bit of a weird point. You know, going into the idea that it had only been planned for one season, is that the reasoning why this happened? I'm not sure. Again, they time skipped enough that it sort of made sense that, like, maybe they all weren't around. But again, the main criticism you'd say about that is just that, like, not that Korra didn't go in depth and tells the full story of Aang and everyone. It's mainly that the other material hasn't. That they've stayed away completely from fleshing out the ATLA cast when they're older. And that's more of just a series-wide thing, which hopefully they'll address and fix going into Avatar Studios content. But yeah, not really sure about that one. 9. The Earth Queen eating Bosco. Okay, what's their point here? Like, okay, like it's bad, you know, poor Bosco that this happened, and it obviously gets across how villainous the queen is, that she hates animals, and it's a very opposite thing than King Kwei, who obviously liked animals in Bosco, and that the queen who took over immediately moved to eat Bosco. Like, okay, like, how is this a major flaw? Okay. 8. Korra not giving everybody their bending back. He had benders lined up to cleanse them of their ability. During the season 1 finale, when Amon takes Korra's bending away and it's restored by Aang's spirit, Korra immediately uses her newfound powers to give Lin Beifong her bending back. But it's then revealed in season 2 that Korra felt no need to give the hundreds of other people who lost their bending that back. Source on this? Did this happen? This feels like it's creating a situation that didn't actually happen. That they're equating us not seeing Korra line up everyone who got their bending taken away to give it back as we didn't see that, therefore it didn't happen. We know it happened because in the Legend of Korra video game, the Tano and the wolf bats, well, Tano at least, gets his bending back. So that implies that pretty much everyone who wasn't a criminal got their bending back. So that's the main thing. So obviously, like, she wouldn't give it back to the triads, I suppose, who lost it because they were sort of known criminals. But I'm assuming she gave the bending back to all the Order of the White Lotus guards who got their bending taken away, any Metal Bender police officers who got it taken away, and like other sort of random people who got it away. So there's that. So you know, that's a bit weird. 7. How quickly the world advanced. Let's see. Taken to new extremes in Korra. Cars, electricity, radio, scores of other technological advances. By the end of the series, they had magnetic trains and Colossus giants. And look, this is actually, I think, a relatively fair point. In that this is probably one of the main reasons why people don't connect as much to Korra as they do to Avatar, is just that, yeah, they probably do go a little bit too much into technology to the point where it does sort of impact the series, and that book 4 is definitely quite heavily reliant on a lot of the mech suit style stuff, and especially with the Colossus being the big sort of enemy at the end. Look, I get it. They make it work. It's not that it doesn't work, but it's the question of, as a fan, do we like Avatar in this era with super high technology? That's more of the issue. And like Avatar had its points as well. Like it introduced like its own sort of technology, but it's the step sort of beyond that. I think that's where the problem, I think, kind of comes in a little bit, in that the submarines and stuff like that were very much, you know, aspects of technology, but powered by bending. And now we're getting into full sort of, you know, giant mech suit. Admittedly, you know, she controls it using metal bending, but still, it's a huge robot. And then we have other robot style stuff, and some of those scenes are cool, but in general, from what I see in the fandom, I think more people want to see Avatar in a more traditional era than they do want to see Avatar in a high-tech or futuristic era. Now, obviously, that's not everyone, but I think there's a reason why, say, when The Rise and The Shadow of Kyoshi came out, that everyone was just like, wow, this is what we've wanted for so long, is just to go back to sort of classic Avatar, where bending is the focus, we don't really have much technology, and we can have that be the focus. Because there were points in Korra where we maybe didn't get as many bending fights as we would have wanted to, or couldn't, get into, just because tech was in the focus, regardless of like how realistic it was to have the tech there or not. It took away from kind of what we expect Avatar to be. And it's not even that they necessarily like super heavily explored it, in the sense of, you know, making it really be like technology versus bending all that much. They addressed it like a little bit, in say like book 1, little bit as they went on, but not as much as you'd maybe kind of think. And look, there's potential going forward of like, what if we get to a point future in Avatar where technology is more modern, and it completely counters the need for any sort of bending, and bending becomes very much this super old, super traditional art. And what if the world actually needs it but no one knows it anymore? But there's that. 6, how often Korra lost. She was purely physical, concentrated on the fighting aspect. Okay. Fans even acknowledged they would have been fine with this different if it weren't for the fact that Korra lost nearly every meaningful battle. She was a pro at taking down chumps and amateurs, but could hardly ever hold her own against other masters. For an Avatar that was supposed to be a fighter, she wasn't great at winning fights. I think there are maybe like 1 or 2 moments in the series where you're kind of like, okay, maybe Korra should have won that fight. She maybe should have done better there. Or from a character arc perspective, they decide to, instead of having the like up of the arc happen now, they go down a little bit more and then up. In terms of, say, like Battle of Zaofu, say everyone expects Korra to finally win that fight, but then it's a loss, and you're like, oh no. But that's part of the arc there, that Korra lost when she thought she was back, highlighting that she needed to develop a little bit more. Like it was frustrating to see that happen, but it was part of the arc. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't ever feel like she was ever completely like overpowered. Like, she has sort of initial sort of quote unquote losses to sort of like chi blockers, and like she's completely overwhelmed when she attempts to confront Amon. It's not a full on fight in that it's more of a plot scenario where Korra basically gets defeated, quote unquote. She gets sort of bested by chi blockers towards the start, but then comes back. Those things happen. She loses against Tarlok, but Tarlok's Tarlok. He's a part of the Akon family. He has special bloodbending. Like there's no problem losing to that. There's no problem losing to Amon. Losing to like Unalaq in the end, a dark avatar, a character who has like a sort of relatively even power level against her. Like I don't really, see that as being much of a problem. Say like she loses to like, I suppose like Eska and Desna chase her out to sea, and then like a dark spirit pops up and she gets, that's where she gets injured going into beginnings. There's stuff like that where like, yeah, sure, plot reasons she sort of, quote unquote loses the scenario, but like very few of them are like actually just direct sort of, it's a one-on-one fight and she just flat out loses it, because so many of them it is just the kind of like the plot scenario. And it's not like Aang won every fight that he was in. He had fights where he lost as well. So I don't really think there are too many instances where like Korra just does terribly, especially like in book 4. The whole point is that it's this slow recovery until we get to 409, at which point she is much more like her usual self after that point. I'd actually say one of the main problems would perhaps just be that in book 3, I would have maybe liked to have seen her square off against, have her own one-on-one match against maybe one of the other members of the Red Lotus, and maybe have her see how she stacks up against, say, Gazan one-on-one or something like that. They maybe had a little bit of a missed opportunity, there to save basically Korra being properly involved in one of the big fights until pretty much right at the end, where it's more of sort of group combat, where she's working with her father, and then like Zahir discovers the flight, and then it goes into the big, Avatar state battle, which is again more of a story-driven fight, rather than like a representation of Korra's power. I do think this is a little bit much to just say that like it's a major flaw of Korra that Korra lost a lot, because I wouldn't really associate it as like viewing Korra as a whole, as a series. I'd never really have this as a plot point here that like, oh yeah, Korra lost loads. Did it stand out as significant to me? Not really. 5, Bolin and Varric following Kuvira. Korra becoming a dictator with Korra out of commission made perfect sense. However, what made zero sense at all was the fact that Bolin and Varric openly followed Kuvira for 3 long years, even after she blatantly strode into villages and to towns and liberated them without even giving them another choice. It literally took Kuvira trying to build a spirit weapon for... Now, this is one where, like, they probably should have made this maybe a little bit clearer in the show, but it's a sense of, one, Kuvira was manipulating them, and she did that by making sure that these two were mainly involved in the like early stages of kind of interacting with the town, like right after she made her deal, which only she was involved in. Bolin would come in and help people with the sort of like aid supplies. So he only saw the sort of like the good of what they were doing and didn't see the behind the scenes stuff until we got into book 4 and the doubts started to come in. You can maybe question how he missed that for, you know, however long he was with Kuvira. But the point is that, you know, Bolin likes helping people. He was allowed to help people, but he was held back from a lot of the other information. And then Varric, we directly saw that his arc was more of a sort of science at all costs until even for him, he realized that this was taking things a step too far, that the spirit beam cannon was like a weapon of mass destruction and no one should have this. This is not something we should work on anymore. And so he quit. And again, you know, he was mainly involved just in the science side of things. So like, I doubt Varric was focusing too much on the people they're with and stuff like this. So this is just one of those situations where it's like, okay, to us as the audience, we are presented both sides of Kuvira straight away. But Bolin doesn't get to see that the whole time. So that's not particularly fair. 4. Lava bending being a subset of earth bending. Okay. Didn't make a whole lot of sense that the ability was a subset of earth bending instead of fire bending. Why? The premise was that an earthbender could generate enough friction with the rocks to create lava. Was it? But in reality, it seems as though lava should have been a subset of firebending instead. Why? Obviously, their reason is given there because Roku uses it. But this ability was so cool, nobody cared, that didn't make any sense. This is the problem with this, is that, and I've said this a few times because I've actually done quite a few videos talking about bending and special bending, and even a lava bending video quite recently. Heat doesn't necessarily mean it has to be fire bending, because water benders change water in from solid to liquid, and then they can make it into a gas, and it's not about heat. They control water and they can switch it into different forms. Heat is a result of that, I suppose, because of physics, but they're not heat bending in the same way that fire bending is. And in this case, it's like lava is earth. It's hot earth, but it's still earth, and it's just this really basic logic of hot equals fire, even though there's no fire involved in it. And look, I've explained this before. Yes, you can maybe feel that going down the path that they went down in ATLA, that they were leaning more towards it being a firebending technique, because they show Kyoshi using it, Zito using it, and Roku using it. And especially because Zito is the fire avatar, and his application of the avatar state is making volcanoes erupt, they made it seem like specifically that was a fire technique there. I think very clearly, early days, they thought lava bending was fire. But when they got to actually thinking about it, they realized the way bending tends to work, this fits much more with being an earthbender. And they had the out of everyone who had used it previously was an avatar, and so was an earthbender, and so you can get the out of, well, avatar state gives both possibilities. So there. 3. Amon and Tarlok. They had to go. Okay. Yeah. Their deaths provided a lot of plot holes. Again, this was a satisfying death, but nobody besides the audience saw it. The others are just thinking that they're out there somewhere. Pretty significant plot hole. And it's like, okay, sure. You can say that in the sense that, like, oh, they escaped. Why aren't they wondering where they ended up? Why didn't they ever address it, even by like a little scene highlighting that, oh, people out at sea found the wreckage of the boat that they were in, like, blown up, confirming that they're dead. Did they need to do that or not? I'm not sure. Is it? It's. I suppose, is it a plot hole? Kind of, but not really. So it's one of those things. And again, it's just like, yeah, I think they probably assume that they're dead because, like, I'm sure they probably saw the explosion from a distance, but again, they never covered the details of, like, did they send anyone after them on the boat, or were the remains found, that sort of thing. There's no real, like, moment where anyone says we can confirm they're dead. It's just like, well, I guess that happened. So yeah, I sort of get it, but is it a major flaw? I don't think so. 2, here we go. Jinora spirit projection. Let's get into this one. Season 2 was riddled with moments that fans simply had to look the other way during, but this was one that had fans scratching their heads. During this season 2 finale, Korra faces off in a giant spirit battle against Vaatu and Unalaq, and there's a moment where all seems lost, only for Jinora to project her spirit into the battle, despite her body being in the South Pole. I don't know why they need to clarify that, as if it's something really, really weird, and helped Korra to defeat the evil spirit. If that sentence didn't make sense, that's because it didn't make sense to the audiences watching it either. Even worse, the writer still never explained Jinora's spirit projecting, even though she continued to use it for the remainder of the series. I don't get it, because, like, you know it's called spirit projection. So that's the explanation. Jinora can project her spirit. Like, what's confusing about it in any way? The introduction of the spirit world came in an episode where we directly saw a spirit outside of someone's body, and yet you can move around in the physical world. And Jinora, with her special airbending spiritual technique, which they, like, double down on in book 3, highlighting that it's a spiritual technique with airbending involved, or airbending with spirituality involved, she has more control over the movement of her spirit through like the spirit world and so on. Like, we know what this is about, and then you have to add into the fact that this is during harmonic convergence, the most energetic event in the entire world of Avatar, which is why we have giant Korra, which is why we have giant Unalaq. Everything spiritual is at its peak during this specific moment that only happens once every 10,000 years. As for what Jinora does, I've never got why so many people just kind of turn their brains off to the obvious explanation of, well, look at the what does Jinora do, what happens. Well, Jinora engulfs Unavaatu in light, and Rava, who was previously invisible or not there inside of Unavaatu, suddenly is visible as a dot of light. What did we get explained in Beginnings? And notably, and I think this is the thing people always forget, they replayed the line of dialogue from Beginnings in the Tree of Time, that, you know, neither of us can either be ever fully destroyed, we'll always be reborn in the other, and the idea of basically the balance of light and dark has been effectively a concept we've been exploring over the course of this entire book. That's what the spirit bending technique does. It changes that balance one way or the other. You can turn a spirit dark, you can turn a spirit light. And in the case of Rava and Vaatu, who are the spirits of light and dark, they impact the world around them. And before Jinora comes in, it is an era of darkness, because Unavaatu is in complete ascendancy. Rava has been quote-unquote destroyed, again, given that she can't ever be fully destroyed. So the whole point of what Jinora does here is just shift the balance just a little bit in the direction of light. So that it's, instead of it being sort of like 99.9% light, it's now 99.9% dark. It's now only 99%. And so Rava's finally visible because there's enough light in the area. And again, this gets into Janora's special. And that's what we learned over the course of book 2. You can't forget in book 2 that Janora had one of the biggest character arcs by highlighting that she is unique in terms of how spiritual she actually is. In that even after Unavatu, took control, she still had light spirits around her. Even though darkness should be across the entire world, Janora can keep spirits light around her. And it's that light energy that she brings into this battle to kind of shift things in the other direction. So that's that. I always think people make such a big deal about this, of just like, oh, it's the most confusing thing ever. But it's also a case of like, wow, you have to like put a slight amount of thought in and keep track of some things that they've told you already to know what's going on. Is that much of a problem? Does everything have to be sort of spoon fed to us in the series? I don't think so, and it makes sense, because nothing that happens, I think, in this whole sequence feels so like weird that it's just like, what's going on? I've completely lost track of what's going on. We've been dealing with like spirits and and stuff like that all book. I don't get it. So number 1, Vatu and Unalaq fusing. Okay, Dark Avatar, W. What didn't make sense was why the fused version grew into a gigantic spirit monster out of nowhere. Instead of being the Dark Avatar, they became a giant dark spirit that was... Well, they still were the Dark Avatar. That was easily vanquished by giant Korra spirit bending. Easily, I think, is a bit much. In that, sure, initially she had a run, but then Unavatu came back, and then Janora kind of came in to help. Let's just call a spade and say nothing about the spirit world made any sense. How about we not do that? That is the exact sort of attitude from people that causes things like this to be the number 1 and 2s on people's list, is to just be like, well, it's the spirit world. We'll never understand it, so let's just stop thinking about it and just say it was all a problem and it all didn't make sense. No, it's there, it's explained. So I don't get what the problem is there. As for why did it go dark, 2 things. 1, harmonic convergence amplifies everything spiritual. 2, in this case, it is the combination of a human and a spirit, but with the spirit in control. In the actual Avatar, Rava and Wan, Rava and Aang, Rava and Korra, whatever combination, Rava doesn't ever seek to sort of take over the body of the person that she's in. Whereas in this case, Vatu takes over Unalaq and like alters his body. And so the power completely changes it to the point where obviously by the time we get to Unavatu, Unalaq is basically gone, and he's only there in terms of the concept that a Avatar-esque being is a combination of a human and a spirit. That both are needed for a being to be this powerful, because an Avatar being is more powerful than a just all-powerful spirit, as we saw. Hence why Wan was able to defeat Vatu quite easily after fusing. So you need both. It is the combination of a powerful spirit plus a powerful physical body that is why the Avatar is so powerful. So the giant aspect here is really just to highlight again, Vatu is in control, so he takes over. Vatu is used to being big as his usual form. As darkness grows, he grows, and Rava shrinks. So this should be Vatu at his peak. And would that be best shown just having it be Unalaq with the Rava crest on him? I get why they went for the, Vatu wants to put on a show. He likes being big. to represent darkness being in ascendancy. So he goes big, and Korra goes big to counter that. And we get a cool fight, a unique fight that obviously we've seen the type of before with the whole Koizilla thing from the end of book 1. So there's that. Next, we'll go into this article. Now, this one's from 2017, but when I was looking for articles to do, I was just like, oh, this one has 20, and I think it has some different points. So I think a few of them are similar, but some of them will be different. So yeah, the preamble is pretty much the same. 20. Who exactly is Amon, and how did he gain the power to block bending? His plan failed when he revealed his waterbending skills to his supporters, revealing his life for all to see. However, one must ask exactly how Amon could energy bend to begin with. He couldn't. Apparently, he didn't exactly take bending away, but blocked certain chi paths. But even then, the question of how still remains. But you just said this is the answer, so what? Perhaps a bit more extensive backstory would have shed some light on this particular ability, but alas, we got none of that. And look, this is actually fine. I would agree with this. I think the end of book 1 is a little lacking because the only thing they don't really do is explain to you this significant ability. How did he do it? Because we're ultimately getting to the point where he was a waterbender. He didn't have some wild spirit powers or anything like that. He was a waterbender, a super powerful waterbender. But within the show, we don't get the explanation. We had to get it from outside of the show. And I don't think this is where, like, going back to this, I think they give you all of the clues to come up with the solution to how Jinora does what she does and to explain Cosmic Korra and Unavatu. I would kind of agree with the idea that they probably don't give you enough of the clues just within the body of the show to piece together what the details of him blocking bending actually is. So it's one of those things where I think without any of the explanations that we got, either from like the art book or the interview where I think they touched on it, I think you need to be directed to the idea that he is using water bending through blood bending to basically do interior chi blocking on people, more permanently targeting, the root of bending in the body rather than the extremities. So there's that. It's one of those things where, like, I do think they could have done a little bit of a better job at making it clear that the ability was him using his blood bending to block bending. Like, some comment from someone, whether it was Amon himself or Katara, to explain why Korra is blocked and she can't undo it. So I get it. Like, I do think that is the one little piece of information with Amon I would have liked to have seen. So I think that's fairly valid. 19, energy bending is a Deus Ex Machina. We've already addressed this, obviously. I don't think it is. How did they word this, though? Ability never been properly explained. Sure, but, it's fine. Ton of questions. Plot device to prevent. Okay, they're still going with that. Ostentatious manner. So this is more just covering energy bending as a concept. And sure, like you would say, is it particularly well fleshed out? No. But this is probably the one technique where you're probably like, I doubt they're ever going to really go into the like origins of energy bending. Like, as much as I would like it and like to know where like the Lion Turtles got it from, where the Lion Turtles got the power of the elements from, that probably is that origin story where they're either going to hold off on that for ages or just never tell us, because there eventually gets a point where you're asking probably like too many questions and you're going too far back to explain everything. But I'm relatively fine with energy bending just existing as sort of bending is elemental bending is still bending energy, but energy bending is this sort of root form of the technique, which is how people got bending in the first place, and can do all this other stuff that relates to it. Like, this is how you remove bending and give it bending and stuff like that. So, I appreciate the way they've done it in the sense that, like, the Line Turtles have granted, Aang and the avatars going forward this ability to sort of do some level of energy bending, like take bending away from people and sort of fix their energy network if something happens to it. But they haven't given the ability to grant people bending. So, there's questions about this, but I think it makes sense in the grand scheme of things overall. 18. Where are the spirit portals in Avatar The Last Airbender? Apparently they existed during the time of Avatar 1. Yes. 2 portals, North and South Pole. Why were they not mentioned in Avatar The Last Airbender? The story itself starts out in the North Pole. It's pretty obvious that the residents wouldn't miss a giant beam of light. Well, that's the thing. It's not a giant beam of light in Avatar. It's a sealed portal. And sure, it's still got this visual, like, seal over it. But they're 2 very obscure places on the map, literally top and bottom of the world, out in the middle of, like, the tundras, basically. They're not even surrounded by a city like the central portal now is. So I get it. Like, in the South Pole, it is just, in the last couple of years, been rocked by the raids and has very few people and is pretty much down to, like, 1 or 2 small groups in the tribe. You really think they're going to mention to Aang, like, oh yeah, there's a spirit portal, like, over there. Does that help you? Like, it kind of feels like, what is the spirit portal going to do for Aang? Like, sure, it's a way where he could theoretically get from one place to another, but this is before he's connected with the avatars. When he's in the, like, South Pole especially, he has no information. He has nowhere near enough information to understand what the portal is, how to use it in any way at all. And then when he finally does, it's kind of like, what is he going to do with it? Because again, there's always a danger with the portals that they've been closed, and and Korra has to open them in Korra, so they're not giant beams of light. How do you miss them? They're closed. So it's one of these things where, like, yes, it's a point where it's fair enough to bring up, like, why doesn't it come up at any point? But what real use, I suppose, in Avatar in most of the situations, like, is there for it? Because sure, it's a way for the people of the northern and southern tribes to go to see each other quite regularly, but Avatar's not really, like, about this at all. So there's that. And yeah, like I mentioned in the comments there, the Everstorm. There's an Everstorm that surrounds the southern portal as well. So it's particularly bad in the southern water tribe. So I suppose it's a little bit easier to get to in the northern tribe, but again, that's the problem there. 17. How come no one knew about harmonic convergence? Okay. Right then. So look, they're aware of it. It's every 1,000 years. 10,000 years. Okay. Somehow, no one knew about such a monumental event that completely reshaped the world. Twilight's fire stages were completely unaware of this event. How did no one know about this except a random shaman from the fire tribe? I personally, off the top of my head, don't know the history of the real world 10,000 years ago. Like, I'm which era am I talking about? What's going on? I can't think of that. And especially in the specifics here of the history of the Avatar, the history of bending in the Avatar world is only 10,000 years. So it's this situation where, sure, humans were around for, I guess, a couple of these, but for the first couple, there was no bending. I guess humans just survived during these events, and then eventually we got to the situation we had in Beginnings, where bending finally became a thing, the Avatar became a thing, and there was more of a sense where, you know, we can alter the way that it actually works. I get it. And as for why does a random shaman from a fire tribe know it, it's because it's not a random shaman from a random fire tribe. It is the I guess the leader of the Bonte tribe in Korra's era, a very notable tribe because they would be one of the few tribes in the entire world who would be aware of ancient history. So that makes complete sense to me. As for the White Lotus, it's an interesting one in the sense of like, the Bonte tribe tends to keep to themselves. Not everyone knows about them. The White Lotus is more just directly focused on the Avatar, and you have in Korra also the idea that they kind of lost their way a little bit. That they're maybe not as amazing of an organization as they used to be. So there's that. And then, yeah, in terms of like human history, they more or less seem to imply that human history is only 10,000 years old. So this would be the equivalent of us like directly sort of almost like knowing about the first ever humans, exact details of what happened, that sort of thing. So I don't really have a problem. Like, it's obviously noted in the book, so there is some history, there's some sense that this knowledge exists within some people, which is why like Wan Shitan's library has some information on it. But it's a pretty obscure event in the grand scheme of things. In the same way that like not everyone knows about all these sort of specific celestial events, like when like Mars is most visible or Venus is most visible. Like, it takes specific knowledge to know about that sort of stuff. So I don't really get this idea that like everyone should have known about it just because it's a major event. It's 10,000 years. So there's that. 16. The necklace that Aang makes for Katara is simply forgotten later on. Look, this is just pointing out that the necklace that Aang makes for Katara in the fortune teller just gets forgotten. Like, I never placed that much significance on it in that episode. She got her necklace back, so naturally she'd go to using that because that one is the one that has significance to her. Sure, it would be nice if we got a Katara and Aang moment where it was revealed that like she did keep it, and it did mean something to her that Aang made it for her. But it's a very minor point. Like, it's just like, okay. 15. What happened to Sokka's precious meteorite sword? Okay. Yeah. Why doesn't Sokka decide to search for the sword later on? With Toph's earthbending skills, finding these weapons shouldn't have been hard. And sure, this is actually fairly valid. The sword is significant. Why hasn't he gone to seek it out yet? This should be something that happens. My guess is that he does find it. Like, I suppose just in chat. Do you think that the sword that Sokka has in the Old Friends poster is a meteorite sword? Like, in my mind, I think he gets a meteorite sword. Whether it's the same one or it's a new one, my guess is that he has a meteorite sword at some point. Because I think it's sort of significant that he hasn't replaced his lost sword with any sword. And I think it's because he wants to use a meteorite sword again. And look, is it a major plot hole? No. It's just a story that we are asking why it sort of hasn't happened yet. And there's a lot of situations like that. I'm assuming this might be something they look into. It would be something I'd be interested in, but I don't think it's a plot hole necessarily. So there's stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, he has a sword in the Old Friends poster, but he has it in a sheath, so you don't actually know if it's a meteorite blade or not. So it's one of those kind of situations. So 14. So who's the father of Toph's kids? Okay. 2 children, Lin and Sue. The creators never properly specified who was the father of these kids to begin with. This is made all the more suspicious since the viewers are informed that Toph had two mysterious lovers as well, whose identities aren't revealed either. They're forgetting we know the answer to one. So that's weird that they don't acknowledge the fact that we do know that Lynn's father is Kanto. So that's a bit weird. If you're putting this on your list, you should at least know all the facts surrounding the situation. That's not great. That doesn't look good. But yeah, sure. Why, at this point in 2021, why do we not know who Soo-Yin's father is? Because did anyone watch the stream for the Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy live reading? The chat was nothing but who is Soo-Yin's father. Like, I'd say that was the spam comment during that whole thing, was people constantly asking that question. So it's one that is on people's mind, because it is crazy how some of these major reveals about just who ends up with who, we still don't know the full answer to. And I think this is one of those ones where it's like, yikes, like, just tell us. Because the fact that they haven't told us makes it feel like, is there a big story behind it or not? One of them was obviously random. Now, is it just going to be some other random guy? I'm not sure. Does that imply there's some significance to it? But if that's implied, that would suggest there's a bigger story coming up. But I have no confidence that they're going to focus specifically in on this as a major plot point. I have no idea. Like, obviously, for me, I want it to be the Duke. Everyone knows I'm a big The Doff fan. But, you know, it could be Satoru. It could be Sokka. How much I read into the Sokka one, I'm not really sure. But I'd say almost the fact that they've never mentioned anything about it leads in the direction of, like, maybe it is something big like that. But I don't know. I don't know if they'd go for that at the same time. So that's just one of those things. So yeah, 13. The United Republic of Nations was pretty useless for the majority of the series. Okay, that's what it is. They're useless, impede the action of the Avatar at times. It seems that the only function they have in the game is to look imposing and nothing else. Their forces are rather impressive. So, like, I guess, like, they get targeted a few times in the series, and they kind of end up, like, losing and not doing as well as you'd think. And the leadership, I suppose, isn't particularly strong from Raiko over the course of the series, which makes it seem like the nation itself has very little going for it. But I'm not really sure what point they're necessarily trying to make here. That, like, a nation was useless in the series. Like, it's like, okay? I don't necessarily really know what is meant here. In that they don't really mention Raiko, so they're not specifically talking about... They're not specifically talking about, like, the president and, like, the leadership. So are they just talking about the United Forces, the military of the United Republic of Nations? If so, then I guess that's a relatively valid point. Like, we didn't see much of Iroh 2 as the series went on. So there's that. 12. Zahir's existence is just one massive plot hole after another. He's a cool villain, okay. We can't overlook just how convenient his entire existence ends up being. His information regarding the air nomads is rather suspect, especially since the entire clan was almost brought to the brink of extinction just decades ago. If that wasn't bad enough, Zahir also ends up being the only airbender to fly. This is a slap in the face to people who devoted their lives to airbending only to find out a criminal was bestowed with this valuable gift while they were just completely ignored. Okay, this is someone who has completely misinterpreted the ability of flight. The ability of flight, there's a reason it hasn't been achieved by many people, that we only know of 2 people, is that it requires you to have no attachments to the world, which, yes, is ultimately sort of a goal. It is an aspect of general air nomad culture that they sort of seek to be free and not attached to the world. But ultimately, they all have some sort of an attachment somewhere. The air nomads as people do care about the rest of the world. So they can do enough to do their airbending and stuff like that, but to go to the extremes required to actually achieve flight, it requires someone quite extreme, like a Zahir, who himself could only do it after Pali died. And then Guru Lahima obviously is by no means your typical air nomad. There's a reason Zahir like reads his poetry and he's referred to as like a philosopher and stuff like that. So there's some there's some stuff like that which I just feel like is like, I think you've missed the idea of the philosophy behind the flight technique. That it's almost like, because Zahir is not part of air nomad culture, he was actually probably more suited to it, because it's one of those situations where the air nomads as a people are always going to have some form of attachment. As for how he knew about it, he's part of the Red Lotus. They are not an ancient organization, but like an organization with information. They have, they'd have some information. And again, in the same way that, like, are you then saying that Tenzin having extra air nomad information in this era is a problem? People have explored the air temples, found artifacts from the air nomads. And especially, I think, after the 100-Year War, I'm guessing a lot of that stuff was perhaps gathered together and more of it is out there now. So I don't think it's a problem that Zahir knows stuff about air nomads and stuff like that. So I don't get this one. 11. So, can Zuko bend lightning or not? So there we go. Throughout the series, okay, Zuko can redirect it. Okay. Wasn't already specified that Zuko had no talent when it came to lightning. Not really. Does he? I think they sort of have a point here of just like the question that, like, it's a kind of plot hole that they never come back to, the question of if he can generate lightning on his own. Instead, this is a confused like mess of like, they're like, well, Azula can bend lightning and then Zuko can redirect lightning, so that means he's actually okay at it, but the fact that he couldn't generate it means he wasn't good at it, so why could he redirect it in the first place? And it's like, the comics make him good at it. It's like, what are you saying? You had a point here, and you ruined it by trying to go into depth, but doing it all wrong. Baffling. I don't know what they're talking about. So, 10. Did Azula ever recover from her mental breakdown? Let's see what they get here. Comics, mental asylum. Okay, somebody just hasn't read the comics. So, has she recovered from her mental breakdown? You would say, yes, she's certainly on her way. She is nowhere near as like wild, I suppose, as she was in, say, The Search. In Smoke and Shadow, she seems much more composed, but still has a little bit of a crazy edge that, growth is needed for the character. But in general, this point is someone basically looked up very basically what happens to Azula in the comics and didn't read any further and just left it like that. 9. What happened to the lion turtle that appeared at the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender? So the sole surviving lion turtle made its appearance. Okay. What happened to this lion turtle after his encounter with Aang? So, I suppose this is the question here. Do we still associate it as being canon that this is the last lion turtle? Like, that point from Avatar Extras, and I think the old Nickelodeon website on the lion turtle referring to this guy as the last lion turtle. Do we still view that as being canon post Korra and the reveal about the lion turtles? Because the details there are that apparently the lion turtles were hunted and killed to the point where there's only one left. And I'm kind of like, there's some big bodies of line turtles. Where are they gone? Like, there's a little bit too much to explain with the idea that, like, potentially, like, there are dozens of line turtles. So that means that there would be at least, 24 line turtles. Where are the other 23? There's that sort of thing. I don't know, like, that's not what this is asking. This is asking, where the line turtle is. Again, the line turtle will appear when the line turtle feels they are needed. They seem to have a connection to sort of the fate of the world, in the sense that they tend to know when they are needed and when they're not needed, and they only appear if they feel that they can turn the tides of, like, the world going down a really dark path. Because again, it seems like that's the idea with the line turtles, is that the line turtles were sort of the guardians of balance in the world prior to the Avatar. The Avatar then took over that job effectively, but the Avatar is just one person. So the line turtles back up the Avatar every so often, which I think helps to explain specifically why the line turtle will come to Aang to help him out. So there's that. But yeah, in general, my thoughts on this are that if this is the line turtle, wow, that's one amazing story you need to tell us about how, I suppose, any human could kill a line turtle. I get benders are powerful and that you can theoretically imagine ways a powerful bender could take out a line turtle, but still, it would take a lot to, I think, kill a line turtle. Not to mention, where are they? So I think they're just being mysterious with the line turtles. They apparently left the world after the era of the line turtles came to an end and the era of the Avatar started. One came back, of course. So I don't really know. Maybe that's just the legend of it, of, like, people only know of one line turtle, and they just don't know where the other ones are, so they made up something that the others are gone. Who knows? So there's that. So Avatar: The Last Airbender Legacy. Yes, that book. Totally super canon. Not that it's non-canon, but 8. Was Jet killed or not? We already addressed this. Did Appa ever rejoin its kind? His kind. Okay. Appa rejoined the herd of sky bison to spend the rest of his days in peace, right? Never really explained properly. Oogie. Okay, so this is ultimately just the idea of, with this, we basically sort of know the general idea that at some point, I think Aang finds a herd of sky bison, and that's where they kind of come from. Like, that has to have happened, given that they're there and around in, Tenzin's time, of course. So, this is just one of those things where, like, we sort of know it's happened, they just haven't told the story yet. So that's that. What did they specifically say here? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. This one, yeah, like I said, it's just something they haven't gone back to. What was the point of the White Lotus's existence? Why didn't they intervene in the event of Avatar: Last Airbender? They were happy to sit by. The Red Lotus ends up being far more active. Well, they do end up getting involved. It's just, I suppose they wait for the right moment to change it. Because this gets into the idea of, like, okay, that group on their own, could they have just teamed up and, like, won the war if they wanted to? And the answer ultimately is kind of like, from a battle perspective, sure, who would have stopped them? But it's all about the politics. This is exactly the point of why Iroh doesn't fight Ozai and that sort of thing. It's that this would be viewed as, I suppose, the Order of White Lotus getting a little bit too probably political, being the, like, main force going up against the Fire Nation. Because all of a sudden, I think you're on the point then when their organization is potentially on the verge of kind of being considered a nation of their own, even though they're not a nation. And so it is a case of like, how do they act? By backing up the Avatar, being the ones to take back Bossing Say as the Avatar fights the Fire Lord, and as Zuko fights his sister. So this is just like, why didn't they do everything? It's just one of those things. I don't think the White Lotus is beating the whole Fire Nation army. Well, how is that fight happening where the whole army fights the White Lotus? It's obviously going to take place in terms of more tactical battles and stuff like that. But anyway, that's not really the point of like, could they do it or not? So there we go. And then like we see, there's not that many of them as well. There's only that small group, and they're very powerful characters and influential in their own way. But you had to have specifically the right people in terms of the Avatar. Being the Avatar had to be the one to fix things. 5. Guards identify and attack Varric and Bolin through a wanted poster that shouldn't exist. Okay, so we switch over to Korra in this Avatar: The Last Airbender list. What are they saying here? Varric and Bolin serve as comic relief for a large part of the series. They need a convenient plot device to progress their story when they're on the run. In a security checkpoint, the guards attack Varric and Bolin because they identified them through a wanted poster that was supposedly circulated around. Problem is that Varric and Bolin were captured mere minutes after their escape, which makes the existence of these posters completely improbable. Off the top of my head, I don't actually remember the exact timeline of this. I know the situation they're talking about of like they see their posters and like that's why they go after them. But I don't remember how long it is between sort of, Varric and Bolin are sort of, on the run from the Earth Empire and they arrive at the checkpoint. Like so Remembrances is episode 8, meaning that the checkpoint thing has to happen in like episode 6 or 7, because Bolin doesn't come back in Reunion, of course. I'm just forgetting the exact kind of scenario here of like, is this actually accurate that Varric and Bolin were captured minutes after their escape? I don't think this is maybe as bad as they're making it out, but again, I personally, just off the top of my head, don't really remember this exact kind of point. But that's that. So we'll just go on. We'll see what chat says about that one. 4. How did Iroh even meet the Sun Warriors? Okay. They apparently survived. Iroh learned from them. Okay. How did the Fire Nation not have a clue about these elite level firebenders to begin with? How did Iroh gain knowledge about them? Well, the answer to this is obviously that Aang and Zuko went to seek them out, not knowing any information about them, and found them. Iroh obviously would know some of the history about their existence as a people, and he also would, I guess, go to seek them out. Now, also, we don't know the specifics for when he joined the White Lotus. Might the White Lotus have had specific information on them? We're not sure. But by the same logic that, Aang and Zuko found them, Iroh could have also found them just sort of randomly, because they are known in history as being a people that existed but are thought to have died out. So they keep themselves, undercover and don't, make themselves known to people. So, it's not that the people of the Fire Nation don't know about them. They just don't know about them as like an exact people. Like again, this is just a case of like, okay, we get it. Everyone wants to know the Iroh backstory. But it's not like a plot hole that a story we were never told is like theoretically impossible. It's absolutely possible. It's just a story we weren't told. So it's not a plot hole. Um, um, so there's that. So it wasn't minutes. They were walking for days, and Bolin carried Varric. Yeah. Just from the picture, I guess there's this idea of like they're on the train. They escape. They do the thing where like Bolin, earth bends them like through the bottom of the train thing, and they escape. And I guess the writer, I guess, is assuming that it's only minutes between them being there and them being at the checkpoint. But it's clear that they're filled with mud. They've got like the beard and stuff like. Varric's got the stubble and stuff like that for a reason. So yeah, that's fine. 3. The question regarding the whereabouts of Zuko's mom was never revealed. Look at the picture. What are they gonna say? Oh no. A comic called The Promised was released. Wonderful. Let's just move on. Like, one, they know it's covered in a comic, and they used a picture of a comic. They got the comic wrong, what exactly it is. What's this? They just linked to the Wikipedia page for The Promise. Wonderful. 2. Zuko could have led the Avatar to the Fire Lord's palace during the eclipse. Okay, what are they doing here? Zuko, who had the means to lead the Avatar and his team to the stronghold, wasted the eclipse by simply talking to his father and declaring his loyalty to the Avatar. It's boneheaded move for obvious reasons. It also showcases just how stupid it was for Zuko to not take advantage of such a golden moment, especially since his plan was to declare the Fire Lord was meet his hands at the Avatar anyway. How? Like, he doesn't know where Team Avatar is during this moment. The whole point is that he's going to leave to try and, like, find them in some way. He knows it is not his destiny to take out the Fire Lord. So I get it, like, theoretically, Zuko has the knowledge and he's on the right side at this point to lead the team to Ozai, but this doesn't work. What? 1. Avatar 1's tale is a rushed mess. This is going to be wonderful. Plot holes, okay. Received the ability to bend from line turtles. The actual elements that they could bend came from careful observations of the creatures around them. What? Received the ability to bend from the line turtles. The actual element that they could bend came from the careful... That is such a weird sentence. The actual element they could bend came from the careful observations of the creatures around them. No. Because the actual element they can bend is the ability to bend, which is the line turtles giving humans the power of the element. That is the element that humans bend. It's just the case that I guess the animals also have that ability because it's clear that, sky bisons use airbending to some degree in that they float just kind of naturally and their tail slams are like clearly more than just a big tail moving. So what's going on here? How did Oma and Shu directly get the ability to bend from the earth from the line turtles? This makes absolutely no sense. It ruins the lore the series was so carefully trying to form. And look, this is the thing. The Oma and Shu thing is like the one thing that beginning sort of directly sort of retcons, because they directly say that in that story that Oma and Shu became the first earthbenders or something like that. The thing that I think is they're out on that is that Oma and Shu's story is written on their tomb, immediately implying their story is written by someone else. It is a legend written in a cave. It is not a full flashback that is shown to us like Beginnings is. Korra literally witnesses the events of her past life versus the legend of the story of Oma and Shu, which again, Avatar in its early days is incredibly vague when it comes to sort of bending, in that they say, people studied the moon and studied the animals and, learned from it. They just say like they're very general learned. We are never shown this idea that the animals are capable of turning non-benders into benders. And it's just this difference of like the form, the philosophy, the style best suited to using those elements. That came from the moon, push and pull. The animals which best represent those styles. The core ability to just the energetically, like a human able to bend an element, that comes from the line turtles. And look, it works together. I get it, the Oma and Shu thing is sort of confusing because it's, again, earlier lore from the series kind of being a little bit retconned. But I would also say that the Oma and Shu stuff is kind of retconned by ATLA itself. Because by the time we get to 313, we get into the idea that, Toph introduces the idea that she learned from the Badger Moles, but we know she was a bender before she learned from the Badger Moles because she was having lessons since she was young. So it's not that the Badger Moles turned her into a bender. No, they showed her a form, the form of earthbending that perfectly suited her being blind like the Badger Moles. She was the perfect person to learn from them as a way, for her to learn earthbending because the typical way wasn't working well for her. And then in the same episode, Aang and Zuko go to learn from the dragons and they see the dragons. And guess what? The dragons don't change anything about Aang and Zuko. They don't change their energy or anything like that. They show them something. Aang and Zuko learn a lesson. Learn an insight about fire. Nothing happens to them. That's the point. That's the point of this. And I'm amazed that just like, again, people like who have this inability to realize that, look, ATLA was pretty vague when it came to that like early content, in that if we're meant to view it as being the case that the animals literally were the ones who could give people bending, or that people could just study an animal and suddenly gain an ability, why the significance of the show being called Avatar The Last Airbender? They have Appa. Appa should just be able to people should just be able to spontaneously learn airbending from watching Appa. That's the implication if you take the stuff said by ATLA like super literally. When look at all the scenes involving the animals in the show, it's never once implied that like a badger mole can turn you from a non-bender into a bender. It's just a case that study the way the badger mole does earthbending, and it's that's the correct form. That is the most, I suppose, efficient way to bend, as shown in Beginnings by Juan here, who goes from being just another one of these like fire throwers like all the other firebenders from the era, but he learns from the white dragon, and all of a sudden everyone can see that he is on another level to them, that his abilities with fire become an extension of himself, whereas the others are still in that basic zone of throwing fire. That's all they can do, is they can produce a little bit of fire and throw it, whereas Juan is able to like redirect it, because he does a bit of the dancing dragon form. The movements of a dragon when it's flying is kind of like the style that you have to do. So that sort of stuff. So yeah, never get that one. Last but not least, CBR article from a few months ago, but still, 10 things that annoyed even dedicated fans. So let's just get into this. 10. There was barely any mention of the Fire Nation. Fair enough. Everyone wants to go to the Fire Nation. Everyone wants to go to the Fire Nation. And yeah, it's a bit of a frustration with the show that we never actually went there ourselves, but there's room to go there. I wouldn't say it's a major criticism for me that, the the show doesn't feature the Fire Nation, because that's like criticizing the show for kind of like doing something it never really set out to do. Yes, it's a little bit unfortunate that like it's almost teased that they're going to go there like once or twice, but it doesn't quite happen. But it means that there is this open thing in Korra that seeing the Fire Nation during this era is going to be very, very interesting. So yeah, that's fair enough. Annoyed dedicated fans, like I guess that fits the tone of the article. That's pretty fine. Here we go. Everyone's favorite topic 9: Aang's favoritism towards Tenzin. Aang as a father had always favoured Tenzin. This was brought to light when his other children, Kai and Brumi, brought up that their childhoods and how they felt like he was always going on trips with Tenzin and bonding with him as the only airbending child. It was hard and annoying for fans to accept that their beloved Avatar Aang was neglectful of his own children's feeling. And look, this is the point here, is that the episode basically just pointed out that, was Aang a perfect father? No. Was he a bad father? No. Because if you watch those very same episodes where you bring up this idea that he, favored Tenzin and didn't care about Bumi and Kaya's feelings, they get to the solution among themselves that their childhood wasn't that bad. They bring out the picture, the happy family together, and realize that this is them reuniting in the more present day and bringing up some issues from the past. They're focusing on the negatives and not on the positives. And sure, it does a highlight that Aang was, slightly favoured Tenzin. Yeah. But that makes sense. Tenzin was his only airbending son. Of course he was going to make absolutely sure that Tenzin knew everything that there was to know about air nomad culture, because Aang was the only one who could give it to him. So it means like this is kind of why Tenzin had so much pressure on him, and we get the kind of book 2 arc with Tenzin is about this, and that's like fine. I just think overly framing it as like, oh, Aang's this really bad father, they don't quite do that here, but it's never a great point. I don't think this is the worst wording of it I've ever seen, but it's still not great. That this is a common thing that tends to come up with people. I've obviously done videos on this. I did one a few years ago, and then I think more recently I did one like a year or so ago, where I covered it in a lot of detail. Again, a lot of this does come down to the fact that we're only really informed about Aang as a father in those few scenes, which is specifically cherry picked from a negative perspective by Kaya and Bumi, whereas Tenzin obviously highlights more of the positives. So it's just a case of again, like a lot of these, I'd love to see more content showing Aang as a father, because I doubt it would show him just being a bad father to everyone at all times. It's just that they maybe don't even it out as much as you think they should, but again, they still have that letter there, and in the grand scheme of things, the whole family turned out pretty well. Kaya, very powerful waterbender, and again, she's more connected with the family as we go on through book 2 into book 3 and so on. Bumi has a full-on arc of he was pretty high up in the United Forces military. Of course, that's success for him as a non-bender, achieved all of that, and then learned airbending, and is, I suppose, I'd be shocked if he doesn't go on to at some point get his tattoos, and that's going to be an even bigger connection to Aang. And it's just especially with Bumi's arc, it's he really wanted to be closer to Aang and did everything he could to prove that he was good. And again, it highlights that, look, sure, they're a little bit annoyed that they didn't get to go on these trips to the air temples and stuff like that or whatever. But at the same time, you see the scenes and they highlight that they're not particularly interested in airbender culture as well. That these were learning trips Aang was taking with Tenzin to, teach him to be an air nomad. He wasn't going to force that on the other kids. And as we see, the like Sakaya and Bumi don't really like the meditation. They know about some of it, implying that like they've taken on some aspects of airbender culture. But in the same way that like Katara doesn't become an air acolyte, he's not going to force that on the others either. So it's just a point that I think gets brought up a little bit too much. This idea that Korra presents Aang as a bad father. 8. The Mako, Bolin, Korra love triangle. Here we go. Season 1, Mako was seeing Asami when he clearly had feelings for Korra. Bolin liked Korra. Korra had feelings for Mako. She agreed to go on a date with Bolin after Mako rejected her. Korra went on a date with Bolin and told her he liked her too. I may be misremembering the exact dialogue, but I believe the situation here was more of Bolin interpreted what they were doing as a date and Korra didn't quite. It wasn't like super clear and like even between the two of them that it was 100% a date as such, even if you maybe interpret it as like it coming across like that. But anyway, that's not really what it's about. Okay, that's fine. Mako and Korra, fair enough. Mako was also unfair to his brother, who knew he had feelings for Korra. Annoying parts of the season. And like, sure, fair enough. Like this, I don't think it is actually too bad. Like, I do in general think that the love triangle gets, I think, over highlighted and overblown as being this like massive part that like the book was like all about love triangle, when nearly all of these scenes are like in 105, like just one episode of the season, and it's only like a handful of scenes other than that. Yes, was it drama focused? It was, but I actually felt that by the end of book 1 that they kind of resolved a lot of this like relatively well, and that they, for it being a more drama focused romance plot, they actually did a decent job with it. And it was more of like book 2 where it went off the rails like completely. So there's that. And in the end, like they're all still friends at it, and fair enough. Like, yes, is it a point of criticism? Yes, but it's not a huge part of the book, at least for me, overall. But we'll move on. 7. The ending of season 1. Korra didn't even kill Amon. It was a brother who did. Korra only 1 season long. It made sense. The first season would appear as a standalone story. There's no denying the ending was rushed and abrupt, unsatisfying, and thus extremely annoying for fans. It's a bit of a general point, I think, there. Like, sure, if that was the overall ending to the show, you might have felt that way. To me, the only thing that felt like unsatisfying was that the only thing was like what I addressed earlier on, which is just that I think all they needed to finish it off was just include the explanation of Amon's ability. And I think that could have come from Katara explaining why she can't heal it, because she doesn't have the same skill that Amon did. That would have helped to just, answer a few things about what Amon was doing and not just leave that in the dark, and just fix a few things about like, this power is ultimately just a very powerful bending ability, which is why an avatar, energy bending sort of themselves can break through it. That would have brought it all together for me. Because otherwise, like, I think a lot of the character arcs and details like that in book 1 were actually covered, like, relatively well. It was just some of those kind of details, at least for me, that it was missing. 6. Here we go. Korra not listening to anyone. Here we go. Korra was a very hot-headed person who always thought what she did was right. She did not listen to Tenzin. when he was training her to airbend, nor did she listen to him when he told her not to go to the pro bending arena. She also did not listen when her parents and Tenzin all tried to warn her against Unalaq and chose to train under him. While she did improve in the later seasons, the first few seasons were hard to watch for the fans, since it's tough to like someone who is constantly challenging authority for absolutely no logical reason. Where do I start with this? This is not very good at all. So this first bit here, back in book 1, you mean Korra, who by not listening to Tenzin went on to find the actual way where she did sort of find the correct approach to gaining that insight into airbending, which she wasn't getting from Tenzin's training methods. Like, sure, she didn't listen to Tenzin all that much, but the whole point here, and I think this is prevalent across this whole point here, is that this person is looking at this only from like Korra and like how she comes across to the other characters, and not the reverse. They're not looking at how those other characters come across to Korra. Also, this one, she also didn't listen when her parents and Tenzin tried to warn her against Unalaq and chose to train him under him. When did this ever happen? No one warned her not to train under Unalaq. The whole point, the dialogue in those episodes were not about that, because no one thinks Unalaq is a villain until like episode 3 or 4, when it actually happens. Before that, the issue is mainly just that Tonraq has a personal grudge against his brother because of their history in the Northern Water Tribe. Tenzin, his main thing is just that he feels he is the right teacher for Korra. This is not them warning her against Unalaq. It's more them saying, Korra, just do it the way we want you to do it, which is train under Tenzin and it'll work out. Again, this is very much a case of putting all the pressure on Korra as a character. Korra is the one making a mistake in all of these scenarios. It's nothing to do with how Tenzin acted towards Korra. It's nothing about how Tonraq acted towards Korra. When look at the way those scenes actually pan out. After 202 and in Civil Wars, Tonraq apologizes to Korra, and he realized he was wrong when he saw that she actually was able to bring the Southern Lights back. Because this was Tonraq was basically just not warning even, just saying, don't go against our plan because I don't like my brother. That I made a mistake by messing around with the spirits and you shouldn't either. He was basically saying, don't associate yourself with spirits because it all goes wrong. Just because something happened to me, something's going to happen to you. But then he was proven to be wrong. I don't get that. And then when it comes to Tenzin, look at Tenzin's arc in book 2. Korra was... The thing is, like, yes, Korra made the mistake of perhaps, pushing her parents and Tenzin, like, aside a little bit too much. But she was right from the sense of, like, her own training perspective to do that. Because the people sort of, like, who were her mentors were not allowing her to grow. And this is what I when I see this come up, this is what I see happen so much, is that people never really look at it from that reverse perspective. That what happens in these early episodes of book 2? What's the first thing Unalaq really does to get in with Korra? 1, straight away, he gives her the respect that she is not being given by basically anyone around her. Raiko doesn't give it to her. Tenzin's not really giving it to her because, as Korra says, Tenzin's just treating her as like another one of his kids. Tonrock is just being the sort of protective father, and they lied to her. This is the big lie, the big, huge lie that I don't get why enough people don't bring this up, is that Tenzin and Tonrock both tell Korra that the reason she has to train in the compound is because Aang wanted it to be this way. That's what they tell her. But the truth is, they just made that decision on their own. Now, admittedly, in book 3, it comes out, and there's the whole like the Red Lotus thing, and it's another situation about like they don't tell her the truth about that until book 3 comes out. That's another thing, but it is another lie in this case. But still, the fundamental lie is that the reason she didn't get to be the Avatar in the same way as all of the other Avatars was because of a decision made by her 2 mentor figures. She trusted them that this was the way it was, and they lied to her. Not to mention, they never told her about the spirit attacks at sea that we see at the start of book 2. And people are like, wow, I can't believe Korra challenges authority figures around her. Why would she do that as the Avatar? Why? Why would she possibly do that? It's one of those things like, yeah, we as the audience, it was clear to us, because Unalaq was always presented as the villain from like a marketing point of view, and we can see it. The characters don't see it though. It comes out eventually, but the characters don't fully realize he's the villain until like episode 3-4. And that's the point here, is like, I am very understanding of Korra's actions in early book 2, because she gets these major reveals of like, she has been lied to by the people around her about major things. And I think one of the most important scenes in book 2 is the scene she has with Senna in K203, Civil Wars Part 1. She goes into her mother and they have a bit of a heart-to-heart. They're wondering, like, is Tonrock involved? And they don't really know. And, Senna's like, we just wanted you to live a normal childhood as much as possible. And Korra, big answer from Korra here. And she's like, I didn't want a normal childhood. I wanted to be the Avatar. And the people around her made decisions that didn't allow her to do that. And that's the point here, in terms of the characters and how they treat Korra in early book 2. After she has grown and accomplished something in book 1, to the point where she's earned a level of respect in book 2, which she is not given. And so, yeah, she challenges authority the whole time, but it's because she's the Avatar. She should be given some authority, but she's not. And look, it's a crazy situation. Does she go a little bit overboard sometimes in book 2? Yeah. But it is a pretty wild situation that she's in. Like, feeling like betrayal from a lot of the people around her, and her tribe is nearly about to go to war. There's a lot that happens as you build up to her nearly getting killed by the Dark Spirit and beginnings happening. So, Korra not listening to anyone. I'd almost say like people not listening to Korra, because that's the point. Like, she says that in a few scenes, because it's always they frame it as like Unalaq wants to train her, and Tonrock is just like, no, Tenzin will be her trainer, and Korra is just there like, hey guys, can I decide who trains me? That sort of thing. And so that's always my thing. It's just like, come on. And look, there's the other side of things with, like, say, Korra and Mako, which I'll criticize more for the writing than I will in pointing at individual characters, because it's so drama focused there, and I wouldn't really read into too much of like, oh, Mako does this or Korra does that, but they very much frame this as the one where like they just for some reason don't seem to work anymore, but they're still best friends apparently. Like, that's where it gets a bit messy. But in terms of Korra and her mentor figures, it's really well done, because by the time you get to 303, 304, she resolves things with her father. she apologizes for maybe being overly suspicious of him as the sort of like the people, like the southern rebels allied with Varric comes up, and she thinks it might be Tonrock. She apologizes for thinking that it might be him, and he apologizes to her for not believing in her enough, like being too much the sort of protective father, and not allowing her to sort of, you know, be the Avatar, and not believing in the spiritual aspect of the job and stuff like that. With Tenzin, again, we come back to it in 309, because they're separated for like basically the entire of the book up until then. Korra comes back and is just like, she apologizes to Tenzin. She realizes that like, you had my best interests at heart, and it's just like, okay, I'm here. You train me now. And what's the truth that comes out? Tenzin has never been particularly spiritual. He's never gone into the spirit world. He has spiritual knowledge because he's done a lot of research on it, but unlike Unalaq, he's not spiritual. So the argument that Tonrock and Tenzin were making at the start of the book was, Korra, continue to do this training that will be ineffectual and not help you. So, you know, ultimately, her being trained by Unalaq did help her. And then being separated from Unalaq and learning the history of the Avatar and having time on her own and then coming back with Tenzin, it allowed her to form her own opinion. That includes aspects of what Unalaq has taught her and what she's learned from him, aspects of Tenzin, aspects of her own thoughts. And that's the growth that Korra goes through in book 2, which is some of her best growth in the entire series. There's all that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, it's that whole episode, the guide, is about realizing, you know, Tenzin gets really frustrated. Tenzin is a little bit annoying at parts of the guide. And he has to realize that he can't be the one to guide Korra into the spirit world. Jinora can. And he has to accept that it is her. That she's the one who has to do it, not him. And it all comes to a forefront where, like, of course, he has the talk with Aang in the spirit world. And then he becomes the mentor, the type of mentor that Korra actually needs. The mentor that he can be to her now, given that he's pretty much trained her in airbending. What she needs is just someone older, someone more experienced, who has her best interests at heart and can give her like general advice. He can't be her spiritual guide, but he can be that sort of, you know, father figure-esque character to her. And that's what he helps. He has information from, you know, learning about spiritual stuff. And so, but a lot of his conversation, as much as it like relates to technical spiritual stuff, is more of just, you know, believe in yourself, Korra. And that is not at all what the dynamic was at the start of book 2. It was, come with me, train in this exact way, we'll do the airbending tour and we'll do all this stuff. Not really particularly trying to help her, given that she's already more or less mastered airbending. But by the end he realizes, okay, yeah, this is what you need. And it's that point. They separated, they both grew, they came back together and were better in the end. In that Korra, Tenzin, by the end, they're more of peers by the end. Like the scene in like the finale of Korra and Tenzin together, if it comes across less as like Tenzin is her mentor, and just that these are two leader characters in the world. But anyway, we'll move on. Oh, more romance stuff. Mako cheating on Asami. Okay. Whoa. This doesn't happen. Well, I suppose a little bit. But I wouldn't say like as a result of that this happened. Because Korra kisses Mako is the way the scene actually happens. And yes, you can make the point that like I suppose he technically kissed back, but the point is that in this scene that they're showing here, it's like framing it as just Mako cheating on Asami when Korra initiated the kiss feels a bit weird. Like, yes, there was the Mako jealous of Bolin moment, in the sense of like there was that scene that resulted in Bolin saying like you know, leave some ladies for the rest of us. But I think that might have been earlier. But still, yeah, it got a little bit messy. But like, I think the problem that happens is that a lot of this, in my mind, comes from the fact that the show fully lent into the idea that blame Mako for all of this. Mako is the one responsible for all the romance drama. No one else. Like, Korra and Asami come out of this no problem. Mako suffers for it. His remembrances arc is all about this. It's nothing but the romance dramas of Mako is Mako in Remembrances because of stuff like this and the way they frame scenes like this. I think actual just like objective analysis of these scenes is like, this is not really what happened. Did Mako do, hashtag Mako did nothing wrong? I wouldn't quite go that far, in that I think it was just a little bit of a mess on like almost all sides. But I do think Korra was more of the sort of like inciting player in all of this. And again, keep in mind that the scene that like Korra had like prior to all of this was Pema effectively revealing how she like stole Tenzin from Lin. So, Korra went in with the that sort of situation in mind. It's just one of those things. I don't like it when the framing is this blunt. That's the case here. That it's more nuanced than it says here. 4. Korra destroying Airbender antiques. Okay. Yes. That is a pretty bad moment. This is definitely a moment where her frustrations get the better of her. It's this isn't like Korra's best moment. I agree with that. I wouldn't necessarily lean into it too much as like the worst moment, in that like the air gates are like back because like obviously like Zahir goes through them, so they're able to sort of either get new ones or like recover these ones and remake them again or whatever. So it ends up not maybe being as big of a deal as like you think, but still like, it's not a great moment, but it's also like not the biggest moment in the world. 3. Korra choosing to go with Unalaq. When Unalaq fooled her into following him, she did so despite repeat. This didn't happen. Are we all in agreement in this in the chat that no one warned her not to go with Tenzin? Sorry, not to go with Unalaq. In the way that they're like framing it, in that the whole point was that they were more or less saying, Korra, don't change your teacher. It was basically just continue to train with Tenzin and do things as we're telling you to do. Not don't go with Unalaq for X reason. No one says like anything particularly like bad about Unalaq in the early episodes. It's more of just Tonraq doesn't want her to train with him because he himself has a grudge. So I don't get that. But anyway, if she had only listened to the people who actually cared about her, she would not have put the world in such danger. Instead, she only did what she thought was best, which again displayed how irresponsibly she behaved despite being the Avatar. Well, this gets into this situation of like, okay, how would things have actually played out if she had just gone with him? Unalaq would have still attempted to execute his plan in some way because harmonic convergence was coming up. My guess is just that it would have prompted a situation where Unalaq would have had to have like basically turned evil or outed himself as the bad guy just of his own accord and went after Korra at the temples, just because he would have needed her to open them up. Now, along the way, this would have just created the situation where, okay, she's around more of the people, who care about her earlier on, but a lot of the same stuff would have still happened in that Janora's spiritual awakening more or less ties in with Korra opening the first portal. So it's one of these situations where like, sure, like if she just went along with things, certain stuff would have happened. But it's like, yeah, because Unalaq just would have done nothing and just let harmonic convergence pass and just like, oh, can't believe she didn't want to train under me. Guess I'll wait till next time. Like, really? Like, it's just one of these things where, like, no. That's not quite how it would have played out. Roughly, I think the same stuff would have happened. It's just, I think you would have shifted the story away from the water tribes much earlier, because there wouldn't have been as much of a need for Unalaq to do stuff in the water tribes. Or else Korra just wouldn't have been involved and might have needed to come back. Roughly, I think the same stuff still would have happened. It's just, slight different order. But again, like, the framing of this is like, Korra's terrible. It's just not great in my mind. How irresponsibly she behaved. Well, what about the other people in power? What about, like, Raiko? Was Raiko and his decisions that he made not even more, like, irresponsible? Like, after Korra comes back and it's like, okay, I know what's happening here. If we get the United Forces together and, like, attack the North, we could actually stop this right now if I'm able to close one of the portals. And Raiko's just like, no. And you don't understand why Korra is frustrated with some of the people around her. Okay. Because it's not like they had a whole comic that basically framed Raiko as a absolutely terrible president and was in a landslide replaced by Zhu Li, who works with the Avatar, and guess what? Things have gone pretty smoothly since then. So, it's just like, okay, fair enough. Number 2, Unalaq destroying the connection to past avatars. The Avatar state is a matter of much intrigue and fascination for Avatar fans. The fact that the Avatar can connect with his or her past lives and learn from their power and experiences is one of the things that makes Avatar such beloved shows. However, Unalaq and Vaatu destroyed Korra's connection with the past avatars, preventing her from ever being able to contact them again. This was a point of major annoyance and disappointment for fans who had fallen in love with all the past avatars. And look, I see this point a lot. One of my most popular videos that I've ever done is the video where I go in depth analyzing if it is in fact possible at all for the past lives to be restored. I go in depth on the mechanics as we know them and stuff like that, and the amount of comments that I get on that video that are just what really comes across is like you can get the sense of desperation. It's like no, they'll come back, they'll find some way to get them back. That like there's no acceptance of this. Like this is such a sting for so many Avatar fans that this has happened and remains a thing to this day. So many people are so desperate for this to be reversed. It has to happen. And I think it speaks to what a decision for the creators to make, to go ahead with this as a plot point. To just, these things, these guys you care about, they're gone. And they won't be coming back for Korra. And I'll always respect that decision. For like, people complained so much about the book 1 finale, and that like Korra was just given everything and she didn't have to like sacrifice anything or do much to get it back, and then they have Korra actually have to like work to get the Avatar back, and she loses something permanently in the process, and people are like, what we didn't want it to be that bad. And it's just like, fair enough. So look, I get it. This is always going to be a point of contention for some people, that it was, this thing that they really care about, this mechanic of Avatar that they love so much is now gone. But it's only gone from Korra and Avatars afterwards. Any Avatar we cover from the past, from before this, we'll see the past lives. And because they're the past lives, it means we don't technically sort of miss any of this. Like, really the only thing that we miss is that Korra specifically doesn't get to talk to these characters. And then if we do get the next Avatar, that unknown Avatar, we won't get to see talk to Korra, and so on. We can still see Aang talk to these characters. Kyoshi talked to the ones before her. It's still present within the universe, because the universe is more than just Korra going forward. So it's not that the past avatars are gone from the franchise, because I do think we're going to be getting a lot of flashback content covering different eras. It's not all going to be going forward. Will it ever be restored? I'm not sure. I don't think Korra is going to be the one to restore it, because I think her mission will be more about uniting humans and spirits. But the Avatar afterwards, I can see that potentially being something that the Avatars afterwards maybe work to try and find a way. Now, is it possible or not? Who knows? To me, after the video that I did, the main piece of analysis ultimately comes down to this question. The past lives, do they only exist through Rava? So when an avatar talks to a past life, it is literally just Rava sort of projecting herself in a way to represent that spirit. And anytime we see a past life, it's just that. Or are the past lives actually somewhere like in the spirit world and the avatar can just communicate with them? Because to me, because there are a few scenes like, say, Karuk, when she meets Karuk in Escape from the Spirit World, he talks about, like, even as a spirit, that he's still going around trying to hunt Ko. And the question really there is about the idea of, so does Karuk exist forever in the spirit world, constantly trying to hunt Ko as a spirit? Or it's just that because the projection of Karuk is Karuk, he naturally would want to hunt Ko because of what happened. So because you have a projected Karuk there, he's going to be doing what he plans to do. It's a very complicated point, but it probably is the answer to this question. My understanding of it, and the reason that they can't come back, is that they are facilitated through Rava. That when Rava was destroyed, these were gone. The energy, memories, and stuff like that that makes up the past lives is now gone. Rava has been reset. So the thing that would allow her to connect with them isn't there anymore. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense that each avatar is a reincarnation of one. They all have the same spirit that constantly gets reincarnated. It doesn't make a lot of sense that there is hundreds of the same exact spirit out there in the spirit world. Now, again, we don't know the exact mechanics of this too well, and how exactly it works or not. It is truly very complicated to try and consider. In the sense of like, oh, why can't Korra just restore the past lives like Aang restored the Avatar state in Escape from the Spirit World, which was by reconnecting with the most recent 4 avatars in the chain to fix the issue. The problem was that Aang just damaged his connection to Rava. He didn't, it wasn't gone, fully restored, like the connection of Avatar and Rava restored, and then trying to fix it. So that's the difference, is that the energy of these past lives was still there for Aang to connect with. It's not there for Korra. And that's why I do ultimately lean on the idea of it is that Rava facilitates them. And that's why you see, I think, moments like we only ever seen one avatar sort of projected at the same time. Now, this scene, of course, is more of a visual representation to highlight sort of like this is what is being lost. We never see like Korra talk to 2 avatars or have a conference of multiple avatars. That never happens. It's always one at a time. And especially because the way it works is like in a chain, that you have to go back like to the one just before you and then so on. I think that highlights the idea that it is Rava facilitating it, and Rava can only do one sort of spirit projection at once. So I think that point of just we never see an avatar talk to 2 other avatars probably tells you the answer, in my mind. Is there a way to get them back? Probably. They can come up with some way. I think one way immediately that they can get, I suppose, most of it back is just Korra go to the Tree of Time, talk to Rava and Rava get her memories back, because the Tree of Time has everyone's memories, and it theoretically should have Rava's memories. Rava's memories would consist of her time with every avatar, so that would at the very least get back, like, Rava, what do you think Roku would do in this situation? And Rava could, do something like that. So it's maybe not as effective as it used to be, but it's still something. And it would allow for Rava to be more of a character, because it would mean that Korra, right now, being the only avatar on this new cycle, has to work specifically through Rava, and it would allow Rava to become more of a character, and utilize the fact that we now know that the avatar is a 2-in-1, because I don't like the idea that, like, just Rava's just silent the whole time. I kind of like the idea that there's more of a communication between the two. So yeah. As for, do I mind if they do it either way? Not really. I don't mind if they keep this forever going forward and it's just, they're gone. It is a new cycle. If they do come up with a reason to bring them back, that's cool, that's big, that's fine. So that seems pretty cool. So there's that. Number 1, the underdeveloped romance between Korra and Asami. The romance between Korra and Asami was a bold step taken by the writers of Korra. However, they were not allowed to openly portray LGBTQ+ characters or their romance on screen. The writers had to fight to even include the final scene of them holding hands and walking into the spirit portal. While the comics that followed up did show the Korra-Asami relationship much more explicitly and in depth, their shippers were left disappointed and irritated. The reason was simple. Heterosexual couples could get away with two-timing and lying to their beloveds, but homosexual couples couldn't even be canon in the show. And I think this is fine. Like, that is something that did honestly sort of annoy fans. That you can look at it from this sort of representation point of view, and back in 2014, this was viewed as being a pretty decent, I suppose, step in the right direction. Most people were delighted that they went for it in the end. But it was just as valid to be kind of critical of the fact that, like, they just barely confirmed it. Like, the fact that so many people did have to read the Mike and Brian, like, posts that they put out in social media to fully confirm it, I think told you everything you needed to know. That, you needed to do more setup beforehand. And I think even the creators acknowledged that in their posts, that they realized maybe a little bit too late that they were allowed to do a little bit more than they thought they could. And only when they started fighting to make sure something happened in the end did they realize that, oh, we could have actually got a little bit more in than we thought. That's effectively, what they've said. And, that means that, okay, yeah, it's underdeveloped and that's fine. But it was also only the very start of the relationship. So I've never had like a massive problem with it. I do feel it doesn't have the same impact as like the ending of ATLA, just because Aang and Katara coming together after all the build-up, I think had a bit more impact than this. Whereas there was a decent amount of back in 2014, like, question mark? What is this it? Checks Tumblr. Oh, yes, it is. That sort of thing. The comics have obviously done better with it, but I still feel we are severely missing the dynamic between these two, because I think Turf Wars and Ruins of the Empire both did Asami a little bit of a disservice by having her be the sort of both books placing Asami in a situation where she has to be rescued rather than allow Asami to develop, because Asami's the one who needs the development to back up sort of Korra's strong character arc. Like, we know all about Korra, everything about Korra. Asami not as much, and so the relationship has always to me felt a little lopsided in that one of these characters is the most developed character in the show, and the other character is probably one of the least developed characters of the main cast, and I want to know more about, they're just dynamic, and we get little moments here and there, but there's so much of a need to, have some sort of like drama happen, like Asami has to save Korra, Korra has to save Asami. Can we just show the two of them, talking a little bit more, just to get it across that little bit better? So there's that. Yeah, like it's fine. Like I think this actually sort of like fits in a way, because it is the last. They do choose to end on this moment, and it is a case of, yeah, they sort of end on a little bit of an underdeveloped moment, and a few of these points, which are actually like relatively okay, I actually felt over the course of this, a few of them were sort of mind-numbing, but like, say the ending of season 1, it's like, yeah, fair enough, a little bit of an underdeveloped moment. You could say that. Say the lack of the Fire Nation, bit of an underdeveloped moment. And then this one, yeah, you could say like underdevelopment. Like that's sort of the Korra criticism, as we sort of talked about a little bit, that with Avatar you have like these little bits and pieces here and there, but with Korra it's more of a case of like somewhere in the middle of like each book there is something more substantial that, yeah, probably needed to be developed a little bit more, or a good bit more, to really make this book, be the 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 it should be. So I think this one's actually like not too bad overall. But yeah, they're the articles that I wanted to cover here. I thought it actually worked out quite well. We got to cover quite a few topics here. Obviously, we varied from like some pretty like random points across these ones, from like just like, yeah, sort of funny things people make fun of, to like, just stuff that, yeah, we just don't know that right now. It's not really a plot point or a plot hole or anything like that. Like, to just getting needlessly like nitpicky, or like, why didn't they technically explain how they imprisoned Hama or anything like that, or like Jet dying. But we were also able to go like a little bit more in depth on some of these points. Like, I was pretty happy with just the fact that, like, 2 of the points here allowed me to go pretty in depth on the whole, Korra in early book 2. Basically, the defense against the criticism you often see online as the Korra is a brat criticism, which I hate. So I'm glad I was able to kind of jump in and do a kind of pretty in-depth sort of analysis of why I think that's a kind of weak criticism, to say just that Korra doesn't listen to people, and it was a problem how she was in early book 2. So that's cool. And again, another thing that really highlights here is just that on the Korra lists, everything was from book 1 and book 2. There was like one thing from book 4 that was a really minor point of like how did Korra, like Varric and Korra, like sure you could say the top one was the very ending of the show, but most of it was from book 1 and book 2 for the most part, which was kind of weird. Though I suppose, actually, I'm completely contradicting myself here. And they had a Zahir one as well, but that was a really weird point. The Zahir one, like his entire existence was a plot hole. But yeah, that was really weird. So pretty much gonna wrap it up here. We'll just have my boy Unalak on screen here. Getting into, I suppose, like, will things finally kick off from here, just from like a Korra Avatar news perspective? I really, really hope next week we get the Suki alone preview pages, because we just need something to happen. The last few weeks, I think, outside of some merchandise announcements, have felt like some of the worst weeks in the fandom, just because Avatar Studios just is like, means that we should, there's more coming. We know there's bigger things coming, but the current content has never felt like more disorganized, or that we're being held back. Information is being held back from us more than it is right now. So I really hope the Suki Alone preview pages come out, and maybe I can get a review copy of it. That would be pretty cool. But other than that, it's just like, yeah, waiting for book announcements and all that sort of stuff, which just remains really, really frustrating. Like, because we've still got like pretty much exactly a month until the first episode of the official Avatar podcast with Janet Varney and Dante Basco, which I go back and forth on if that podcast is going to be anything super notable or not. Just because I tend to not get too much from voice actor like content necessarily, but because it is a kind of part rewatch and they're going to have like guests, including like writers and Mike and Brian, that makes me interested. But I'm very intrigued to see how that actually pans out. Very, very interested to see how that pans out. I hope they lead with someone big, that it is like maybe a Mike or a Brian or both. That would be very cool. I doubt that's where any like news is going to come from, but still, seeing those two talk about Avatar, and I suppose especially whenever they might have recorded it and things are maybe in a more positive light, I'm just eager to see Mike and Brian talk about Avatar in a time post announcement of Avatar Studios, just to see where they're at with Avatar, because it has been so long. Like, because that's the thing of like this was in 2014. This was 7 years ago. Like, that's a long time. It really is a super long time. And we're not going to have any of the new Avatar content until 2022 or 2023. So by the time we get it, it's going to be 8 or 9 years in between Korra, or in between like Avatar series. It was only 4 years between Avatar and Korra. So it's going to be a really, really big thing when we get this new Avatar content, because just double the amount of time, like nearly a decade by the time it's probably going to happen. It's going to be cool, because like everyone always talks about, you know the Korra fandom are the ones who grew up with Avatar, but now it's like even longer. So I hope that sort of stuff all delivers. But yeah. As for next week, the plan would be to do a stream, but again, like I sort of struggled to come up with a topic like this for this week until like last minute. It'll very much depend on if during the week I can actually come up with a topic, because I'm going to assume we will get the Suki Alone preview pages. Now, the way I'm going to have to cover them is that I think I'm going to do a video. I'm just going to do like a normal video the second they go live. But like, I might do something like maybe we can together look over those preview pages if we do get them, which might make for like a bit of a shorter stream, but we can maybe turn that into more of a full-on speculation. Whereas like in the video, I might only just like go through the pages, some quick analysis. On the stream, we might actually do the sort of like secondary Suki Alone speculation, because I put up a video a month or two ago doing full speculation on it with what little we know. That would change obviously once we have some preview pages, but again, very dependent on if we actually get those preview pages. Let's see, for the next stream, let's do supporting disproving fan theories. Maybe. Yeah, but either way, I'll probably be asking the channel members in the middle of the week for ideas, if nothing happens, because it really depends on when exactly the preview pages hit or not. My guess would be like Wednesday, Thursday next week, but I'm not sure if they even do hit. That's probably me reading way too much into it because I'm desperate for some content, but we'll see how it goes. Definitely. Is there enough religion stuff on the series to talk about it? I wouldn't say so. I really don't think there is, like at all. Yeah, definitely not. I really don't think there is an Avatar. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the stream. So everyone, thanks for joining me here today on this stream where we went over some wonderful, high quality Avatar and Korra articles. Truly some of the best writing we've all ever seen. But yeah, thanks for joining me here and joining in with the discussion. But yeah, that's been the video stream. Thanks for watching, and bye.